Thank you everyone for attending. I see we have what I would call a full room, and that's good. So I'm going to jump right in because I've got about 50 minutes if I'm correct. So I want to try to cover as much of what I believe the really pertinent info that I'm bringing you today. And it's the catchphrase that I talk about is we're always communicating all the time, 24/7. And what I think is vitally important is to be effective communicators. So I do want to cover a few things, and that is Kathy, thank you for the introduction. She covered the kind of overview. I teach at Central. I teach we're called ITAM, IT and Administrative Management. I've been teaching for almost a decade, which is crazy to even think. And I teach primarily on our administrative management side of our IT degree. But every time I say that, I remind myself that I do teach a 300 level IT class and a freshman level IT class. But primarily, I'm in that administrative management side. What I like to say is I teach students how to talk, how to communicate. So I love what I do. I advise students, and I'm also involved I'm on the Ellensburg campus. I'm also involved in the workings of campus with my roles in faculty senate on the executive committee and other roles as I'm asked. I'm originally from Tacoma, so doing this is great. I wish I was there. I wish we were doing it. We'll get there, but I've been in Ellensburg. It's crazy to think I just celebrated 20 years in Ellensburg. Kids, time flies. This is what happens. Once you hit about 30, they just start clicking. So my birthday's coming up. And you go, oh my gosh, how did that happen? I do want to start with two things, and I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share my screen twice because I'm going to just share it generally, and then I'm going to go back and share it again for my PowerPoint. So just bear with me. I want to share a couple things with you, and this is what I do just as an individual, and you're welcome to follow me on my social media channels. You can find me on, oops, I don't want to do that. I'm going to minimize that, and I'm going to close that. And so you can follow me on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and my son finally talked me into it last winter. I'm also on TikTok. Students learn with me that I'm a pretty open book, both as a college professor, as a community member, and just a human living life. So I do what I call Monday through Friday. So you're getting it on a Saturday. I do my quote of the day in a 1-minute video. And so I went back to this quote, I think it's from last week or the week before. And it's a simple 2-word, listen intently. A lot of times, myself included, and this is very normal if we're just engaging in regular conversation, we're listening to respond. Are we really listening to understand what we're hearing from the other person? Are we listening in the purposes of wanting to be a good listener? And we're going to talk about that today. So listen intently. Practice that. The next time you engage in a conversation with a loved one or a colleague, and they come to you and they say, hey, I have something I want to talk to you about. What I want you to practice, and we're going to talk about this in my presentation, is listening just to listen, listening to understand, not listening to just respond, because we tend to do that. And again, that can be very normal. I'm looking at the picture of my son here. This is my family, and he and I, we banter back and forth, and that's very normal. But if Tyler calls me and he says, hey, Dad, I have a problem. Can you listen to me for a minute? Because we've learned to do this with each other. I shift my mindset and I listen to really hear what he has to say and understand. And there are skills you can learn to practice intently listening, which again, we'll talk about in my lecture. And because I was listening to Andy Park's presentation, and I really appreciated what he was sharing about the personal side of his journey becoming skilled in emotional intelligence. And I thought about this with you guys because this is a Saturday, right? I'm hanging out in my new office. Literally, I just put it together. And because I'm an open book in my life, I want to do a public service announcement. And that public service announcement, I'm going to share another picture with you. And it's me. And that picture is what I call my before and after. Can everyone see that on the screen? So the picture on the left is me. I was literally on the streets couch surfing in my mid to late 20s. And because of access to resources, and this is part of the work I do in the community, because of access to resources in the form of treatment for a substance use disorder, treatment for mental health disorders, education, housing, employment, I can go through the list. Because of access to all those resources, I live in that picture on the right. You are getting me in that picture on the right today. I'm a person in long-term recovery from a substance use disorder. And because of access to resources, I haven't had to drink or use any mind-altering substances since March 25th of 2007. And my journey from that picture in the mid-90s, literally to today, has been a hugely beneficial journey because I did not end up being a statistic, right? That picture on the left, many people, and I just got done this month or last month in March doing in-service trainings for the Ellensburg Police Department, helping train them on substance use disorders, because there's a lot of myths out there about addiction and how someone can find recovery or not find recovery. And so part of my work, actually not part of it, half of my work when I'm not on campus, I've done some work in that arena, on campus helping students, of course, but in the community is to help people find a path to recovery, whatever that looks like for them, because there's no one way to get to and stay in recovery. So my PSA is if you hear that someone is struggling with addiction and or mental health disorders, listen to them and do what you can to educate yourself and or help them find their own path to recovery. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to shift gears into what you guys are here to talk about today, and that is communication. So give me 1 second to get this set up. There we go. We're almost there. Oh gosh, you guys, I think I did it. This is great. Can you see the slide on the screen? All right, good. Very nice. So let's start this with a question. And you can unmute yourself and engage, or you can just throw something up in the chat, however you want to do it. And I'm about to find out if I have it in this view, if I can see your chat questions. So we'll test this out. Let me ask you how it felt the last time you had a conversation with someone and you felt heard. You can either voice that or put it in the chat. And I'm curious to see if I'll see the chats with how I have this view. How did it feel when you were heard? Good, I can see the chat, so this is great. Amazing, understood, cared for, keep going. Oh man, I matter, known, important. Orchid, is that you? I matter. That was a beautiful step. Oh, Lauren, validated, opinion counted. Yes, all, I'm getting chills, right? All positive. And because I'm a forward thinking, positive minded person, I like to start with the positive, but I also want to ask the question because I think it's important to ask, how did it feel the last time you even asked, you said to someone, you know what, I need to talk to you and I really need you to hear what I'm saying. How did it feel when you did not feel like you were heard? Shut down, hurt, dismissed, ignored. You know, to keep this light, my wife and I, we've known it, and I appreciate everything you guys said. You see it, and this is my goal for this time we're going to spend together, is just for all of us, myself included, to really take a look at how we communicate. And two things is our message being heard by others, but also, are we hearing others' message? Are we really listening? You know, in this world of social media, and I shake my head because if you follow me on social media, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see lots of positive stuff. You're going to see pictures of my cat. You're going to see pictures of my dog. But I also share, I just put down my German Shepherd of 13 and a half years. And those that follow me, they walked that journey with me because life isn't all positive. Life has struggle, but you won't see me engage in certain topics on social media because it's probably one of the worst places to engage with each other on a communication, especially on a deep communication level, because we lose it, right? I'm going to do my best to try to see your faces and engage in here. But when we're just doing typing on a screen and we can't see each other, we lose a lot. So, but to keep it light, if you jumped on early, I shared that my wife and I are in the midst of a move. We're moving from our home we've been in for 9 years to another home. And so we've been communicating a lot. And my wife says to me frequently, honey, I already said that. I said that to you 4 or 5 times, you know, so many times I'm not listening. And this is normal. It happens. And I think what's really important is to recognize that, you know, like for me to go, oh, you know what? You did say that. Okay, I remember that. So we're going to talk about communication today. So I'm going to go through some of the basics of communication that are important to understand, right? We're going to talk about verbal communication. We're going to talk about nonverbal communication. We're going to talk about listening, which is probably the most important aspect of overall communication because many people, and I'm not beating anyone up because it's myself included, we have so many distractions. We have so much information coming at us at any given time that it's hard to listen. If you think about the last 15 months plus that we've been walking through this pandemic, it's hard to listen because we have so much going on up here, so much. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about, and I'm going to wrap it up with ways to improve, right? Ways to be a good listener, some really basic things we can all do to be good listeners. And one of those things, and we'll talk about it, is removing distractions. I don't know if you noticed, but as I was being introduced, I on purpose put my phone on vibrate and I put it away from me, right? I don't even want it by me. There have been studies that show if you go out to lunch or dinner with some friends and someone simply has their phone on the table, even upside down, it's a distraction. Think about when you have your phone in your pocket or you have your phone somewhere close by where you can feel it. Even if you have it on vibrate, it's a distraction. So I did a couple things. My phone's over there, it's on vibrate, and I on purpose on my watch, I said silent for 1 hour. I don't even want to feel it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. So we're going to talk about those things. Verbal communication. There are fundamental processes of the verbal side of communication, right? And that number one is the overall effectiveness. How well are you communicating what you're thinking or feeling, right? My wife and I have known each other for 20 years. We've been married for 9 years. We know each other well. You know, I found someone who knows me at a level that I've never had anyone in an intimate relationship know me before. And our communication with each other, anyone who's in a long-term relationship, or if you think about a mother-daughter, mother-son, or someone you've known for a long time and you've had lots of opportunities to communicate, you probably have, hopefully, some level of communication effectiveness, the ability to communicate your needs, wants, and desires with that other person. Now, here's the two pieces that are really important here. Perceptual and predictive accuracy. How well do you perceive others' meanings when they communicate to you? And I'm going to explain both of these and I'm going to give you a fun example. And then the other one is predictive accuracy. How well you can predict how others are going to respond. So, question answer. You can just type it or you can say it. For those that are younger in the room and have had more recent experience with this, and those in my age group who it's been a while, but we generally still remember this. Think back to when you lived at home, or if you are living at home, and think back to if you had two parents in a home. Who would you go to if you wanted a yes answer? If you wanted the keys to the car, who are you going to, mom or dad? Go ahead, type it in there. These usually come pretty fast. Yeah. Yeah, there's your predictive accuracy, right? When we want something, we know who to go to. Oh, nice. Yeah, good. Grandma, dad, both. That's great. Sandy said both were no's. Well, maybe you just took the car. I don't know. Hopefully not, right? That's predictive accuracy. And if you think about, as I'm talking about, think about the people in your life that you communicate with on a regular basis. You have some level of both perceptual and predictive accuracy. Now, here's the really, really important part of communication in general. And it's nonverbals. And it's why, as a college professor, oh, and a little backstory, I've taught online for the entire time I've been a college professor. And I like teaching online, right? I also have historically taught hybrid, meaning a couple times in the classroom and the rest online, and then full on in the classroom. My personal preference in our current pre-pandemic, and hopefully come Paul, is the hybrid, right? It's a good balance, right? I get to see students a couple times a week, and then we engage through Canvas and online. Here's the key with communication, and think about your communication in your personal and professional lives. Every study out there, and this is just one example, is that the majority of the communication we're doing is nonverbal. And it's why I falter from time to time. I've gone on a pretty good run without engaging with people on sensitive topics on social media. It's why we see what happens on social media with all the negativity, because it's easy for me to sit behind the screen and not have to look at your face and just type and type and type, right? Because I don't have to see how you feel. I don't have to see how you're responding. The vast majority of communication is nonverbal. And it occurs, this is a good one, it occurs with or without the spoken word. Because, think about it, I always think of the term when someone goes on ignore, right? They're mad at you, boyfriend, girlfriend, mom, dad, whoever it is, and colleague, right? I work in Kittitas County. I remember a friend saying this to me long before I worked at Central, because she still works there and she worked there. She says, I worked for the largest dysfunctional family in the county. And I went, huh, that's interesting. Guess what? She's right. But that's any organ. You can see dysfunction in any organization. But think about this. If someone ignores you or you ignore them, answer me this. Are you communicating or are you not communicating? Yes or no? Yes to I'm communicating, or no, I'm not communicating. What do you think you're doing? Yeah, you good group. Good group. Yeah. That's a lot of communication, isn't it? You see this in family systems where, Joe hasn't talked to his Uncle Bob in 20 years. 20 years, right? You see that. But you see this in other, so it happens all the time. I'd be communicating a lot to you guys if I just stop talking, right? You guys, I would like to try that to see how long you could stand it before someone would say something like, are you okay? Are you frozen? Right? In Zoom world. But it occurs with or without the spoken word, silent treatment. Yeah. And it's a powerful tool, very powerful tool. My dog Chiba, who was 13 and a half. Here we go. A very good friend of mine's grandma, who is now passed, drew this picture of my dog Chiba. Yeah, so I have her great memory now. but I'm an amateur dog trainer, meaning I don't have any formal training, but I trained Chiba from when she was 1.5 years, all basically through her when she passed. But I had her to the point of when I worked with her, I did almost no talking. Isn't that fascinating? How many parents in the room? How much communicating can you do with your child with not one word, but just a look? Oh, yes, lots of communication, right? So that nonverbal communication, you see the list, facial expressions. In fact, my wife and I, we go on a morning walk every day, and I love messing with her. We do practical jokes and stuff, and she can tell. She's like, "No, you're lying. Your nostrils flaring." It's like, oh man, gosh, she knows me so well. But hand gestures, expressive movements, patterns of touch, right? All of those are part of communication, and nonverbals are the most important part. I've already talked about some of these: body orientation, touch, physical appearance. Right? Think about my nonverbal communication to you guys today. I spent yesterday working on, and it's what's behind me. We're in a whole new world. Isn't it crazy? Like, oh yeah, I have to make sure what's behind me. I do have pants on. I actually put clean pants on. My wife, if she can hear me, she'll laugh. She's always got to tell me, honey, those pants are dirty. I'm like, oh, they're fine, whatever. I put clean pants on. I have shirt on. I thought about what's behind me. None of that's part, but it's nonverbal communication. Body orientation. Okay. And think about this. Yeah, usually this is kind of a grandparents, but it can be a parent thing. Stand tall, right? Stand tall. Keep your chin up. Going through a tough time. Keep your chin up. You can get through this. It's all about nonverbal communication. And think about this for a second. If I'm crouched down, right? If I'm sitting and I sit like this, my blood, my body, the physical aspects of my body can't flow, and you'll actually feel worse. Whereas if you stand tall, have a more open posture, and this is something I've had to work on, right? I used to, more be like this. I want to say this to anyone who's watching me. I shared something with you at the beginning that I usually wait until like mid-quarter to share with students because I don't want to scare students. There can be perceptions about it. But everything you're seeing with me and this type of communication that I do regularly, it's a learned skill. You do not have to be a natural orator. Everyone can learn to be an effective communicator, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. Because I appreciated what the first presenter, I think Andy Parks, was it Andy? He talked about it. I shut down. Like I'll go on campus and I'll teach and I'll engage with people. And then I come home, don't talk to me. I love naps. I have a shirt that says dogs, naps, and snacks. Touch. It can be used to help build rapport or trust. And I always say this when I'm teaching, and it's really important in the workplace. You should just not touch people, right? You need to be really careful with that. But if you think about your families, think about people you love. And if you think historically about the difference between men and women, and I actually challenge this a little bit because with my son and I, we're close, right? We hug each other, right? It can generally, men can use it to status assertion or power in women, but I would challenge some of that, especially in the year 2021. We've come a long ways. I say a long ways and I'm doing short. We still have work to do. Think about physical appearance. Size, tall versus short. Just someone, being tall. And think about this. If you're in the work environment and you walk into a subordinate's office and just walking in, if you're standing and they're sitting and you need to have a serious conversation or a sensitive conversation with, don't do it from up here. Sit down, right? Be on the same level with the person. But all of these are part of nonverbal communication. So I want to do this because I want to engage with you guys. What are other aspects of nonverbals that we haven't talked about that you see in your own life and in your own communication? Nonverbal communication. You can unmute. Yes, huge eye contact is so big. Yes, facial expressions. My wife, I hope she can hear this. My wife has taught me how to smile, right? She is the brightest, shiniest person in the world. I'm like, how can you be that happy all the time, right? But she's taught me how to smile because I generally have a serious expression. So soften my face and learn to smile. It's really good. Hand gestures. Yes, Katie, you see me, right? In the classroom. I'm like, David, just calm down. Don't freak the kids out. But hand gestures, even arm position. Hey, here we go. Anyone, so I've been a counselor. And as a counselor, you can watch clients, especially someone who's new to counseling. It's almost, if you don't know someone or you mistrust someone, you'll see this. Or like angry. Yeah, so all good ones, very good ones. So now we're going to talk about listening. It's the most important skill. If you want to become an effective communicator, learn the art, the skill. I say art and skill, it's a skill. You can learn, and then it really is an art form for you to be a good listener, right? It's that process of receiving, constructing meaning from, and I'm going to go right to the next slide because we're going to talk about this process that we all go through, the physiological process of listening. So number one, we receive the information. Number two, we decipher it. We take meaning from it. And this is the one that's always tough for me, remembering. And not just because me, David Douglas, I smoked way too much pot in my day, and it's like, I can't remember it all. There's just too much, and I like technology, and I got 100 things going on. But just think about all of the information all of us have coming at us at any given time. Think about yourself right now. I'm looking at my phone. I'm not touching it, but our devices, how much information is flowing through our devices at any given time. It's hard to remember. And then we're all guilty of this. It's just what happens. It's what you do with what happens, but we all evaluate the information. Like you might be looking at me and going, I don't know if I would have, put so many albums up there. That's too many albums. I like albums. Sorry, I did it, right? But we all evaluate, why did he wear that shirt? It's kind of a nice shirt, but I would have worn black. We all do it. We criticize. Students might go, I don't know why he does his quote of the day. That's the dumbest thing in the world. I'm not here for a quote of the day. I'm here to learn. And then we respond. Now, and for purposes of time, what time do I go till, Kathy? Is it 10:50? I'll wait till she responds. So we go through these processes at rapid speed. Rapid speed. You're doing, I have until 11:10. This is great. We all go through these processes, both like you're doing now with me, right? Just like this. And then you might be in that intimate conversation, that sensitive conversation where you slow it down, and or new information. Think about new information. I teach a class, IT 165, looking through the data. Students learn how to use skills within Excel, tools within Excel to analyze data, right? And it's really cool stuff. You might hear that and go, oh, but it's really, and I say that students are like, that's not cool. It's hard though, right? So you receive the information, the assignment, you read the instructions, you kind of understand it, but then you go to do it and you're like, oh, I don't remember how to do it. So then you have to go back. So just think about all of these different types of conversations you have where you might try to go through this, but then you got to go back. So that's the process of listening. Now, what are some common barriers to effective listening? Let me ask you this. I'm not going to mute the slide. Try not to look at the slide. Just type it in. What are some of your common barriers to effective listening? I'm just going to tell you mine: shiny object syndrome. Like, oh, there's a bird out there. Or in my head, oh, shoot, I don't want them to see me looking at my watch because I have an appointment. What are some of your common barriers to effective listening? Multitasking, info overload. Go ahead. I think, yeah, Sandy, yes. My wife, I love her so much. If I don't understand something, I stop listening. I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. So good. Ooh, yeah. Not trusting people enough. Yeah. No time, yes, to get in depth. Very good. If if I get upset, if you start talking about, and I have some internal feelings, I'm done, right? Very good. All good. Yeah. So everyone has barriers to being good listeners, right? One, and you see some on the screen, concentrating on details, not the overreaching main idea, right? That can be hard. This one, I think of another example back to parenting, avoiding difficult listening situations. And how does this look? It looks like this. So Johnny is at school, and while Johnny's at school, the teacher calls home and lets mom and dad know that Johnny is missing a ton of work. Okay, so mom sends Johnny a message and says, Johnny, we need to talk. We'll talk at dinner tonight. Well, Johnny gets that text message, and he's on a team, but he doesn't go to practice every day. But all of a sudden, Johnny's going to practice every day. Oh, sorry, mom, can we talk tomorrow? Because I got practice tonight, right? And then you'll just find ways to avoid those difficult listening situations. Failing to adjust to distractions is probably one of the number one that all of us can do some simple things to adjust to those distractions. Here's one of mine that I do with students. If a student sends me a message and they say they want to meet with me, number one, we nail down a day and time. And I can't wait till fall, get students back on campus so I can do this in person with them again. But here's my habit. I've created this habit. So we set up a time, I put it on the calendar. When that student shows up to my office, I do some of those same exact things I did for this presentation, and I turn away from my screen and I face them. I close my door and I give them my attention. Those basic things help me become a much effective, I can talk, really, a better listener. This is one that I would encourage you to just, because I've been guilty of this, but I would encourage you, if you do this one, just tell the person you can't talk right now. Don't fake attention. Because we as humans, we can recognize that pretty quick. Can't you think about a time they were supposed to be listening, but they weren't? You could tell they were distracted. You could tell they were faking attention by going, oh yeah, oh, that sounds real interesting, right? So those are some of the barriers to effective listening. Now, how can we improve our listening competence? Well, I'm going to go through some specific techniques, but really the number one is behave like a good listener. Create some habits for yourself, create some processes for yourself so that, and I say this for those important conversations, because certainly me and my wife went and ate last night, and we're just having conversation at the dinner table. We're not like having conversation about serious topics. And we actually, a friend of ours came up and we had normal, so what I'm really talking about behaving like a good listener is for those important times, sensitive topics, emotional topics. Like if I'm advising a student and they're talking to me about their career plan and wanting to create a good, effective plan, that's a good time to listen, right? So be prepared to listen. Like I said, when I meet with a student, I have office hours, of course, but if I can't meet with the student during those office hours, I actually even like to make those appointments. Why? Because that's dedicated time for that student. I didn't plan to bring up students in advising, but this is just the example I'm giving. Be prepared, schedule the time, put it in your calendar. Don't overbook, don't overlap. Take good notes. A lot of people, I think they think, well, I don't, want to seem like I'm not listening because I'm taking notes. Don't just say, hey, I'm listening, but I want to remember what we're talking about. So I create a good plan for you, whatever the case may be. So I'm going to take notes. I've thought about this a couple times. I'm on a committee, and when we were meeting in person, it was really cool to see we all took notes. And I've noticed now myself through Zoom meetings, I'm not taking notes as much. It's kind of weird. And I've kind of been curious if my colleagues do the same. Now, here's a skill that you can do. It says an activity. We're probably not going to have time for the activity, but you find someone and practice this. It's a skill you can start doing today. It's a really easy one to do that will improve your listening almost automatically. And it's rephrasing your speaker's comments. I do this with students in the classroom. I do it when I'm teaching on Zoom. It's not 100% of the time, but because it's a habit for me, it's about 80% of the time. And it's simply saying back to the person what you heard them say in your own words. And again, for those really important conversations, when I'm talking about family conversations, we talk about the big three. For couples, finances, sex, and parenting, right? Those important conversation, good opportunity to use paraphrasing or rephrase. An advising appointment, right? If you're a student and you need to talk to your professor, great opportunity. If it's about an assignment and you don't understand, rephrase the speaker's comments in your own words. This is important because how many of you have had someone just, and usually we're joking around, but just mimicking everything you're saying? That's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about parroting. We're talking about rephrasing the speaker's comments. So what I heard you say is you would like to graduate by June of 2022. And your plan to make sure that happens is you're going to take summer classes every year until then. And that student might say either, no, that's not what I said. I'm graduating in June of 2024. And I would go, oh, wow, I'm glad we got clarification. That just saved confusion. And in your really intimate conversations, it can save arguments. And I believe just doing this skill on a regular basis can save relationships. Because a lot of times we don't do these things and we think we heard something, we miss appointments, we misunderstand, we misinterpret. So it's a great skill to do. And just like I did, ask questions to clarify information. We all have heard this, never assume, but we assume things all the time. We assume things in our close relationships with our colleagues because we know them, and sometimes it's good. But again, when it's important conversations or sensitive conversations, ask questions to clarify the information. And if you're doing these things, you're using active listening. Oh, and that's what I wanted to say is if you start practicing this, it forces you to listen because you're like, okay, I want to understand what they're saying because I'm going to kind of reflect back what I'm hearing. And it doesn't take long where it'll become practice. So we're fortunate in Washington State is that the University of Washington has the Gottman Institute. Anyone heard of it? You can just put it in the chat. John Gottman and his wife are both researchers, and they've spent their entire careers studying couples. Here's one for you. Yes, here's one for you. And you know what? I'd do it now. We're going to be together forever. But hear what I'm saying. They have their couples lab where you can sign up and you can go to their lab and they'll observe you and your partner communicate. And they can predict with a pretty high level of certainty whether you're going to make it or not. It's like, what? Woof, that's kind of scary. And it's all about how you communicate with each other. It's all about how you communicate with each other. And he has what he calls the cornerstones of communication. How to develop a relational culture that really goes into a lot of what I've been talking about with communication. And I've got about 5 minutes and then I'm going to open it up to a question and answer session. Sending those confirming messages and responses. Having self-disclosure. And like what I did at the beginning, again, that was the first time I'm sure I've done it before where I really self-disclose something personal about myself, right? I'm not saying you have to do that, but doing some amount of self-disclosure can help build trust. Here's what I do with students. If I have a student come to my office and we're doing advising and they failed a class. Wow, you know what? I can see that you're really upset about failing that class. And we're going to talk about how we can, turn that around. But you know what I want to share with you? I've failed 2 classes. Yeah, I have. right? So that's a little bit of self-disclosure. You might even try that if they're struggling and say it in some way to help them see that you're human, but it creates trust. That third one I should put at the top, and it's communicate often, right? Communicate often. A lot of couples, you see this in couples, John Gottman has research on this, that they have major fights. Anytime they talk about anything sensitive, they end up in big fights. And fighting doesn't mean that it's going to lead to divorce, because it's how you argue. Just a little side note. But couples that don't communicate, and the only time they really communicate is when they have to talk about something serious, and then they're surprised that they have these big arguments because they're not communicating often. I just gave you some tips on listening actively, right? If Katrina comes to me and she says, honey, I need to talk to you about finances, or I need to talk to you about your son or our grandchildren. I know, shocker, I have grandchildren. Something serious, boom. It's automatic. It clicks in my head. I'll either say, okay, can we talk about that tonight when we get home because I really want to listen? Or do we need to talk about it right now? I'm going to put down what I'm doing and I'm going to listen to her. And you might have noticed that I think I'm pretty funny. And I'm going to tell you something. During the last 15 months, it's been a test of many marriages. It really has. And I can tell you that me and Katrina have laughed more than any time before. Certainly, we've gotten frustrated with each other, especially during the lockdown period, right? Where everyone was working from home and it was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't marry you to be with you 24/7, right? Duh, that's a joke. But, but we laughed more than we ever had. Use humor. Humor can be good if it's not used to demean or put someone down. And so I'm actually going to close this up because I don't have enough time to go through the I statement. I am curious, how many of you have heard, when you see this 3 components of an effective I statement, how many of you have heard of using I statements when you communicate? Good. I hope I see a bunch, at least a few yeses. Good. This is freely available information. And certainly we're not going to use I statements all the time. But again, like I've noted, when it's a serious conversation or when talking about conflict management, I statements. So you can literally Google, how do I use an I statement? And there's some great stuff out there on using I statements. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to open it up to questions and answers on anything I've shared, both, of course, on my presentation or anything else that I shared and maybe you have questions on. You can unmute yourself or type your question in the chat box.
I have a question about trying to get students engaged, especially in the Zoom environment. So it's just a real challenge when I ask a question and nobody answers. And so I wondered if you had any suggestions for that. What I hate doing is calling on somebody and they aren't even around to answer, right? Or I assume they're not around because they're not answering. So do you have any suggestions for that?
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Pam, you're asking, how can I improve my engagement with students in the Zoom environment? Mm-hmm. Number one, difficult. I'll just be real open. I am really looking forward to fall and getting back in the classroom. But here's some of the things I do, and this is just me. Number one, I don't require attendance for Zoom. It's completely optional. And so what I'll do if I do this, like I open it up for question and the room falls silent, I'll call on a student that I know will engage, right? 1 or 2, 3 students in the classroom that I know will engage. And then I'll maybe call on that student that is a little more quiet, and that might help them engage. But I'm going to close with this, and I want to hear other questions or comments on this issue. We're Zoomed out. We are Zoomed out. And I'm going to say this, our students are struggling. Mental health issues are just, I cringe. We got a lot going on. I've had more emails and issues with students struggling with work this quarter than any quarter before. So there you go. I hope that helps, Pam. Any other questions or comments on anything I've covered? Communication tips, tricks?
I have a question.
Yes.
You know, I do struggle with like sometimes focusing on the here and now because I'm always thinking ahead of the next thing or the next project that I'm doing. Do you have any suggestions for staying grounded and being present in the moment, especially when you're talking with somebody and being able to focus and listen, as you say?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Michelle. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking, you know, do I have any tricks or tips on just how to stay in the moment? So, and this is good. I'm glad you asked that because as a person in long-term recovery and with my unique life experience, having been on the streets literally and having the amazing life I have today, and during the pandemic has really helped me to live what I talk about is all I really have is today, right? And so if someone has taken the chance on saying, hey, you know, Dr. D or David or honey, if it's my wife, I need to talk to you about something. Number one, I take that as an opportunity to engage and just be there in that moment. Like, I'll be honest, it was right before you said that I had started clicking in my head to go, and we're moving our kitchen over today. I started thinking about that. And then when you asked that question, it's like, no, I'm right here. So tips and tricks is remove distractions, as many as you can. Take that as that moment in time. Like right now, you guys, all of us really only have 10:59 a.m. on Saturday. I don't know what's going to happen 24 hours. I know I can't change anything about the past. I truly live my life in 24-hour pockets. That's just me as an individual. Certainly, I'm a planner. I have my calendar and all that, but I don't live in the past. I stay right now. This is the time period I have. There you go.
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
You have stuff in the chat.
Yes, I do. Katie, give me 1 second because I'm going to answer one of the questions and then I'll go to you and then I'll answer the other one. So Sandy, what are other ways to stay focused on listening? I have ADHD and even though I want to actively listen, I sometimes find my mind wandering. Yeah, really difficult. And I can empathize with, you know, with that diagnosis of ADHD. So number one, when talking about mental health stuff, for myself, I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I've struggled with depression and massive anxiety. Engaging with counselors and doctors or whoever who can help support those things is really important. And then it's just something I thought of, Sandy, when you wrote that, is nutrition and exercise. That's just something that's really helped me. And I like donuts. Okay, I do. But just a balance. Yeah, you're darn right. And then being active, that can help me so much by, and again, I'm not an exercise nut, like, cause I was chatting in the first one that I run, I go through periods of running, but I'm very active and that really helps me. So Katie, I want to go to your question and then Abigail, I want to answer yours.
Yes, thank you so much. So I have had a handful of interviews for internships. I have more that I need to schedule because I haven't landed one yet. And I wanted to ask you, you know, I've prepared and I have all my information that I want to say, but then once I get to that moment, I'm all stuttered, I'm sweating, I'm and I can't really make my statements clear in the moment. So do you have any advice about job interviews specifically, like where it's really high pressure, a lot is on the line and you have to communicate effectively?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Katie. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're looking for some advice and tips on how to prepare and actually be in during the interview without letting your feelings and the stress get away from you and not being able to answer the questions or ask the questions you want to ask. Is that fairly accurate?
Yes, that's right.
Good. Not good because, man, that's hard. And I didn't say it. I almost said it at the beginning of my presentation. I've done presentations and taught for a long time, and I get nervous every time. I almost am. Oh, and here's a tip for you. So what I almost did, I didn't do it, but I'll do it sometimes, is I'll voice that. So what you might try is when you get in the interview is just say, I'm really happy to be here, but I just want everyone to know that I'm a little bit nervous. This kind of freaks me out. Just by doing that, you will likely get confirmation from your interviewers. Oh yeah, you know what? We expect people to be nervous. We're here with you. We support you. So that's one thing. And then I think I heard you say you do write down your questions. Is that correct?
Well, I prepare my statements of, the things that I have that I'm bringing to the internship.
Yep.
And that way I can, take any question. But, usually the two that I've gone into, I haven't had, questions that they've given me that I could prepare for. So it's just, kind of on the fly answering questions.
Yeah, and those can be kind of tough. And I'm just going to say this, Katie, because it's just something that's on my head. Just be you. And I don't know if that's maybe what you're wanting to be the best you, right? But just be you and maybe write down a couple, because I do this every lecture I give, I have kind of my plan. And it's very normal. I've done tons of interviews to see, and I think that's great. Wow, they wrote down some questions or statements, so that could help you.
Thank you.
Yes. And then, so Abigail, I get caught up in the moment when something in the conversation triggers my PTSD. How do I manage that so I don't do or say something I might regret? It gets me into trouble, and I want to be better at listening without getting so upset. And Abigail, I hope if you can see me, I don't know if you're on the screen, I'm nodding my head. So a couple of things, and it kind of goes back to Sandy's question. I have had PTSD from just the crazy life that I've had and stuff that I went through. Counseling, talking to physicians, the nutrition exercise, and I'm just throwing those out there. You may very well be doing those, but here's something we didn't talk about in my lecture, and it's taking a break. My wife and I, we don't have to do this too much. My son and I do, and because we FaceTime each other a lot, and we have learned about each other that, you know what, I need to take a break. And we step away. Like, I'm actually okay, and he's okay with me hanging up on each other. I don't recommend this unless it's an agreement, but it's all about, it's never a bad idea to say, you know what, I'm having some feelings right now. I'm struggling, right? I statements. I need to take a break from this conversation. That is never a bad idea. A timeout. Never a bad idea. If it's someone you can actually have conversations, like my son and I. We've had conversations. You know what? If you piss me off, I'm probably just going to say I'm hanging up. I'll talk to you later. And it saved our father-son relationship. I can't tell you how much our relationships improved. So I don't know if that helps you or not. And then just some of those things I've talked about. And again, this is coming from a guy who massive anxiety, massive depression, like getting into a public realm like this not so long ago would have been really hard. And I've learned skills to manage that and those tough conversations when my own feelings, we've had some stuff go on. I'm not going to share any of it, where I've had to just, you know what, I need to take a break from this work environment right now, this situation. Never a bad idea. All great questions. Any other questions? Because I think we need to wrap this up. I'm just guessing. We got 5 minutes. You guys have been great. I always like to close with this. You know, I'm all about building relationships and networking. You can, find me on the Ellensburg campus. You can find me on Ellensburg, just ask around. My name's a good name now. Haha, that's kind of a joke, but kind of true. Find me on social media. You guys have all been great, and have a great rest of your Saturday.